Did Cowboy basketball just grab their next Doug Gottlieb level dude? And sticking in the comparison vein, living in between Tyreek and Justice Hill, speed is definitely elite, both on the gridiron and as a flag football MVP.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Alladeo State. Today, we're brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment matter more, especially right now when new customers can get $150 back in bonus bets when your first $5 bet as a winner gets squared away today with FanDuel.com. Meanwhile, we get to dive into the football conversation, and this one's going to be fun because I took a peek back at some of the fastest players in Oklahoma State history in comparison to the new wide receiver offer in Daniel Berry. Naturally, this is going to raise some excitement just because he's a multi-time NFL flag football champion. He's a seasoned player of the year. He's a championship game MVP. From a statistical perspective, it's a little bit different to narrow it down, but from a high school football perspective, it is not. And Daniel Berry can do more than just be a flag football dude. Most recently, this last season, he had 58 grabs for 706 yards, 8 touchdowns at 12.2 yards per completion. Ran 15 times for 121 yards at 8.1 yards per clip. Averaged 29 yards across 16 returns for a touchdown. 20.1 yards on 9 punt returns, also for another touchdown. And then the year prior to that, he caught 36 passes for 409 yards and 2 touchdowns as a sophomore, while adding another 72 yards on the ground and threw for another touchdown as well. So this correlation is not just the flag football angle, which is naturally the one being talked about the most. Somebody had mentioned to me that he looks like Tyreek Hill. Naturally, I said, well, that's a tall task to play like Tyreek Hill. But he physically meant he looks like Tyreek Hill. And that definitely fits. But whenever you pop on the film, you definitely see the electricity that this young man provides. He currently is committed to North Texas, but after committing to North Texas, he got an offer from Wake Forest. Previously, he was being committed by guys like Texas State and Sacramento State and UTEP and UNLV type teams. And that's definitely saying something. I think you're seeing the movement in the Pac-12 and some of the discussions around Sacramento State and Texas State being viable options. Boise State obviously is going to be in that conversational piece as well. But I feel like the recruiting is just about to heat up a little bit more for Daniel Berry as he makes his decision. The 5'9", 165-pound speedster clearly has the ability to make you miss. And here's the beauty of it for me is whenever you look at some of the best in Oklahoma State history when it comes to 100-meter dash times, I pull those up. And Daniel Berry is definitely in the thick of this conversation. Naturally, the fastest of all time is Tyreek Hill at 10.10. Next, you have Tatum Bell at 10.26. Then it's kind of a hodgepodge. And again, Daniel Berry is being clocked at a 10.47 in the 100-meter. In comparison, Justice Hill ran an 11-second flat 100-meter. Justin Gilbert, 10.68. Parrish Cox, 10.74. J.W. Walsh, 10.83. New quarterback at Oklahoma State, Haas Haney, 10.63. Speedster wide receiver that had a good career in the NFL, Tyron Johnson, 10.76. The man, the dude, throwing up the X, Des Bryant, 10.67. Tylan Wallace ran a 10.88. Chuba Hubbard won a bunch of medals in Canada as a sprinter. He ran a 10.55. New Cowboy wide receiver and transfer from Nebraska, Jalen Lloyd, won a national championship in high school in the long jump. He also got third in the country in the 100 with a 10.54. New Cowboy transfer from Ohio State, LSU, J.K. Johnson. I didn't see his 100-meter time, but I saw his 200-meter time being a 22.03, which makes him the fourth highest 200-meter in school history, which would put him pretty close to that 11-second line. In comparison, L.D. Brown, a speedster running back for the Cowboys, recently ran a 22.4 in the 200-meter to kind of put that comp to J.K. Johnson. Brennan Presley, all-time receptions leader in Oklahoma State history. He had an 11.08 coming to Oklahoma State, another speedster running back that has a large family tradition in Stillwater for track and field. Jaden Nixon, 11.04. I tried to find Corey Black, who just had that, 4.3540 at the NFL Combine or the Pro Day. I tried to find his 100 time, couldn't find it in high school. He did play on or run on some 4x4 relay teams, but it's hard to kind of break some of that down. I also looked for Prentice Elliott and Derek Williams times, and I could not find those. And this is all from Athletic Net and Mile Split. So whenever you look at the fastest times in Oklahoma State history that are visible between Athletic Net and Mile Split, Daniel Berry would be at the very, very upper echelon of this conversation. And then I think it's even more impressive when you think of the fact that somebody like a Haas Haney runs a 10.63. That puts him faster than Justin Gilbert, faster than Des Bryant, faster than Parrish Cox. That's pretty impressive stuff. So again, when people say, how's the Oklahoma State quarterback room going to get better? We don't necessarily know that it's going to automatically get better, but we're going to look better. I think that the differentiation in this year's offense versus previous year's offense is going to be very visible, and I think it's primarily predicated upon speed. There's a reason that we threw Jalen Lloyd into this conversation, Haas Haney into this conversation, and I think Rodney Fields is another one that's going to be in that 11-second or maybe even a sub-11-second range. This is going to be a very talented roster from a speed perspective. Clearly, that was the name of the game when they went into the recruiting trail. Getting guys like J.K. Johnson and Jalen Davies and even Brian McCoy and Davian Bradley. Those are dudes that are basically utilizing their speed to get the most out of their versatility. Guys, when Davian Bradley was a 5-star All-American going to Tennessee, the only downside to him at Tennessee was his inability to gain weight. Speed was never a decision-making factor. This was an emphasis. It appears from this previous staff. And we saw Sam Jackson V, former quarterback at TCU, converted to wide receiver at Cal and Auburn. We saw him return a kick for a touchdown. We know what Brian McCoy can do from a speed perspective, and that's being a 5th-round draft pick, out of Akron, very reminiscent, almost a carbon copy of Nick Martin. Well, faster than all of them is Trip White. Trip White, the Ole Miss transfer. And you got to remember this previous season, the linebacker that was able to run in drills every day with Nick Martin without getting beat all the time was Gunnar Wilson. So the speed from an athletic perspective on linebacker is going to be a bunch of Malcolm Rodriguez's, a bunch of Nick Martin's. But, Owen, you also have to factor in you got guys that are 6'5", 260 like Jaleel Johnson, 6'5", 235 like Jandavian Bradley, like Rashad Bradley. Malik Charles has that NFL pedigree that hasn't really shown us exactly what he can be quite yet. Speed kills, and speed is what's going to give Oklahoma State an advantage in a large portion of these games, in my personal opinion. DeJuan Lofton, he was like a 11.08 or 11.18, something to that effect as well. The Virginia Tech transfer that's going to be sliding in there right next to Gavin Freeman. Gavin Freeman is a speed specialist. This seems to be the quintessential purpose of this Oklahoma State roster. Is if there's one thing that can be guaranteed is this team will be significantly faster. Does that mean we'll be better? Who knows? Does it mean we're going to be more explosive? That's the idea. Not to mention, on top of having all of this speed, we made a concerted effort to go out and get the 6'4" Cam Abshire, the 6'4" Christian Fitzpatrick, to go alongside the 6'5" Aya Mike King, to go alongside Terrell Davis that we just got over from UCO, who was a basketball player his entire life. He's only been playing football, much like Malik Charles, for a handful of years. And you can throw Brandon Rawls, another speedster linebacker, into this equation. We have a lot of uncertainty, of course. But when the uncertainty is revolving around speed, you can typically find ways to bridge the gap. This is why I'm excited about Cowboy football coming into this season. This is why I think we're going to have a chance against Oregon. Oregon is known for speed. They're known for their track and field program. So naturally, that marriage makes sense. Oklahoma State speed is likely going to surprise Oregon, which will give us an option to potentially kind of catch them sleeping. Mike Gundy, Todd Grantham, Doug Meacham, they have a need for speed, and I'm excited about the possibilities that it could give us. The uncertainty on the roster could end up being beneficial when teams aren't prepared for this level of speed. Ladies and gentlemen, speaking of speed, you guys know FanDuel is the best in the business when it comes to your potential capability and capitalization in the monetary department. FanDuel is going to give you everything that you need to make the summer sports more fun. Whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way for you to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so you might as well make it more thrilling and get the biggest bang for your buck that you can, which is going to be with FanDuel. You can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburn at the beach, and you can have fun while your bank account creeps up in the right direction. FanDuel is going to help you track your favorite matchups, and the app is going to keep it fresh with new daily promotions that make a fun way to bet even funner. It is easy to use. They have fast payouts that make even regular season games feel more like must-watch events. Whether you're going to place the same game parlay or watch the bet right into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you are part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, that's good because new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if your first bet is a winner. Open the FanDuel app today and visit FanDuel.com to get started with the best in the betting industry and what is best for you for capitalization purpose. Go get with FanDuel.com today. Staying in the comparison vein, yes, Oklahoma State did just get a 6'2" point guard from Israel. And that's not where the comparisons to Doug Gottlieb stop. Whenever you look at his game, right, this previous season, he averaged 9.6 points a game, so just shy of 10. He averaged a few rebounds a game, averaged a few assists a game, and then you pop on the film. Not to mention the fact that he's a 22-year-old that has been playing some semblance of professional basketball for a few years now. I think these are things that are going to be absolutely imperative to his success, but more importantly, when you do click on the film from his professional highlights over the last few years, playing on the U20 Greece team that just got number 2 in the Euro basketball circuit, pretty impressive bunch. And whenever you hear where some of these guys went, it's going to make a whole lot of sense. So that U20 Israel team that just finished second had Danny Wolf get drafted in the first round of the NBA. Ron Zipper went to LSU. Naam Yakov went straight to the EuroLeague. Yoav Berman is going to play for Queens. Daniel Guetta is coming to Oklahoma State. And Avner Dror is going to Harvard. That is a very talented ball club. And I really like this overseas flavor that Steve Lutz is building here. Maybe he cannot cut his teeth into the recruiting against some of the heavy hitters in the Big 12, like your KUs and your Baylors and your Texas Techs and your Houston. So maybe not. So he's thinking outside the box. And we've seen what J.C. Hoyt's been able to do with international players. It's been a massive amount of success. So I absolutely love the idea here of going to get Daniel Guetta. Obviously, recently we were able to get Lefteris Montezoukas over here from Greece. We got Ben Ahmed to decommit from Miami, who's originally from Nigeria. We just got Oregon State transfer Parsif Law, who's originally from Iran. And then we've got Andrej Vukovic coming back from Croatia. This overseas flavor might be precisely what it's going to take for Cowboy basketball to kick this thing into another level. Because, again, when you're recruiting against some of the biggest names in all of college basketball right there in your backyard, in your conference, it might be difficult to go land a guy in Kansas against KU and K-State and Creighton and whoever else is around there. I think you can throw Wichita State in that mix, right? So this is a brilliant move. And, again, as it pertains directly to Daniel Guetta, whenever you look at what he's doing on a basketball court, it is very reminiscent of Doug Gottlieb. Now, he's shooting over 35% from the three-point range, which obviously Doug Gottlieb was not capable of doing. He's in the 75+% range from the free throw line, which is clearly something that Doug wasn't able to do. So the comparisons come down to the ability to get in the lane and deliver a crisp pass. Not only a crisp pass, but a crazy pass. Not quite a Jason Williams level pass, but pretty close. His ability to pass people open is pretty remarkable. And he can score when need be. He can get into the lane. He's very, very deceptive. He has multiple moves that keep people extremely off balance. He's a matchup problem if you're trying to pick him up in the full court. He's a matchup problem realistically if you let him get inside the lane. The difference between Oklahoma State now and some of the previous dudes, right, if you go back or staying in this comparison vein, is he as good of a passer as Cade Cunningham? Maybe not, but that might be the best comparison. I'd say he's a better passer than Byron Eaton, John Lucas III. We just watched Devon Small get drafted from West Virginia. Very good at getting into the lane, but I would argue that he's not adequate in distribution of the ball, or at least adequate's not the right word. He's not as good as Daniel Guetta in distribution of the ball. Can he pass the rock? Absolutely. But he was more of a threat because you had to worry about everything offensively as well. And Avery Anderson, he was a good distributor of the basketball. So was James Anderson. So was James on Curry. But I firmly think that Daniel Guetta has the ability already right now to pass with those guys. If not better than, at least even to. That's the thing that struck me the most whenever you watch what he was doing. And again, at 22 years old, this is somebody that's a consummate professional. He's going to be about his business. So the distractions of being an 18-year-old in a new country, they're not going to get him. The instruction that he's received in the international basketball landscape is probably going to be crucial to some of the success that some of the other guards can come in and have. More importantly, we have to have shooting. So having a Daniel Guetta level passer this previous season wouldn't have done us a whole lot of good because our three-point shooting, our shooting in general, was not very good at all. Now you have Anthony Roy averaging, 34, 35 points a game this previous season. You also have Ryan Crotty coming in and shooting over 41.6% from the three-point range. Kanye clearly averaged 16.7 points a game at Penn State before he got hurt at Mississippi State this previous season. I think this is a very good addition. And then when you talk about losing Arturo Dean, defensively, that's going to be a little bit of a problem, right? But I think Daniel Guetta by far exceeds what we're losing in Khalil Brantley and Arturo Dean. Defensively, yes, Dean's a loss, right? You can't argue that. But if you get somebody that's a better facilitator, that is surrounded by significantly better shooters that can also shoot over 35% from three-point range himself and average almost 10 a game in a professional setting against grown men that are filled with 6'10", 7-foot dudes, I think that is a very, very big deal. This is a masterful addition by Steve Lutz to go alongside Montzukas, who, again, just 2 years ago was being projected as a top 15 European NBA draft pick. You've got two potential guys that can add another layer to this program that we haven't seen in a long time. And the beauty of it all, here's what we know no matter what. The Eddie Sutton defensive philosophy exists again in Stillwater. So if you can get some guys that can facilitate, like a Doug Gottlieb, like a Byron Eaton, to go alongside with the defensive intensity that some of these guys can absolutely get to, factored in with some shooting, factored in with the less of a liability at the free throw line, the expectations in Stillwater naturally are designed to climb. They should climb. And this might become a new expectation. If you can't wiggle in on the top Oklahoma, Kansas kids, then go get the ones overseas that are looking at the best prospects in America to prolong their career and have another shot at getting into the NBA or getting into the NBA draft. The X's and O's aspect of Steve Lutz have always been impressive. Now we have some shooting. I think the defense is going to improve. And you have a true, pure facilitator. I think you can dig back to some of the Eddie Sutton days to understand how this roster has seemingly been put together and why the excitement level should definitely increase in Stillwater for this upcoming Cowboy basketball season. All right, before we get on out of here, as we all well know, we had a couple decommits, and then recently, as of today, Victor Lincoln has flipped from Oklahoma State to Arkansas. And the broad scheme of things, it feels like a loss, right? Especially the fact that he's going to Arkansas. But let's call a spade, okay? Arkansas Razorbacks, they have an Oklahoma man running the team, and we felt like we needed to give them a little bit of something because we went into Arkansas and stole the number one player in the state, Danny Bill III. So maybe this is a consolation prize. But again, whenever you're talking about losing somebody like a Victor Lincoln, who did help the star rating and did help the designation of how many individuals we had committed for this class, I think it's more of addition by subtraction, right? So Victor Lincoln probably would have been a pretty decent piece to this class. But if you can get somebody like a Daniel Berry or a Tayon Tank King or a Braden Presley or an AJ Marks, I do think that the addition by subtraction thing makes sense because we're still going to be able to hammer in the transfer portal. I think everybody in the country is going to try to find a way to divide up the class, whether it be, overloading on transfer portal and getting a handful of high school kids, vice versa, or going more of a 50-50 level split. Any deficiencies that you have in the recruiting process, you might be able to get pretty easily through the transfer portal. Therefore, you can be a little bit more selective. At the same point in time, there's going to come a moment where you realize, well, maybe we missed on a couple potential major gems like a Daniel Berry. Therefore, it would be nice to have this guy, but this guy might actually provide a little bit more instantaneous capabilities. This guy might provide a little bit more immediate ability for playing time. And I think that's largely what is happening here. I think Jason Bradford, again, it did help the star rating and things of that nature. But it's not like his film popped off as, oh my gosh, you absolutely have to have this dude. I think it's a great get for TCU. And I do think that it's going to hurt. Losing Stewart to Illinois, right? Is it not great? Yeah, it's not great, but I don't think it was killer. And I think this is another one of those individuals that it's not a great look to lose, but you also have to factor in we're only going to give X amount of high school scholarships to leave room for X amount of transfer portal scholarships. Therefore, we have to be a little bit more selective. And if anybody is going to take solace in this happening, it's the fact that the coaching staff has been pretty good, in my opinion, for the most part, in identifying the talent that can get the most amount of success the earliest in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So I think some of the things that you've seen from the portal and from the recruiting landscape equal, there's going to be times that we're going to have to kind of push people, not necessarily away, but maybe dial down the effort of recruiting or dial down the in-home visits or just be a little bit more open to the possibility that, the recruiting direction we were with you 3 weeks ago, a month ago, is going to be a little bit different now, especially as the staff goes through the fall or the spring, and now they get ready for the fall. There's going to be some things that pop up, right? There's going to be some minor injuries that might linger for a little bit longer. Are they going to linger into fall, through fall? These are conversations that have to happen. And by and large, I think the most conversation coaches are having when it comes to high school recruiting is we need to get guys that we think are going to be able to start within 2 years. In this NIL transfer era, if you're not playing in 2 years or you're not starting in 2 to 3 years, the likelihood of you transferring is extremely high. So perhaps somebody like a Victor Lincoln would be a good addition for sure. I think he's a talented young man. But I firmly think that there's a better likelihood that we may have cooled off a bit to make room for some of these other individuals, like a Braden Presley, like an AJ Marks, like a Tayon Tank King. The Rejoint Christian, 6'4", 195-pound DB Xavier. I'm not going to try to mess up the last name. Some of these individuals might be targeted as a little bit quicker to get into the scheme, understand schematically what we're trying to accomplish, and make it transferable on the field as quick as possible. I think this is not necessarily a bad thing. And we're not going to have these conversations on, a continuous basis in regards to why some person is or isn't continuously being recruited. And not to mention the guys like, well, I think whenever you look all inclusively, you could put the Quavies back into this conversation. I know him and Tayon Tank King are more for the linebacker, but again, it's necessarily, in my opinion, probably more about numbers than it is about specific positions. Naturally, some positions you do have to fill, but other spots you can be a little bit more selective, and you can find things through identification that you realize maybe you love a little bit less, and maybe you think this other dude could potentially be a little bit more. It's not a slight. It's not backhanded. And it could end up being, not I don't want to say detrimental, but we might kick ourselves if Victor Lincoln ends up becoming, an SEC All-American. But if you can get an A.J. Marks, a Tayon Tank King, a Quavies Beck, a Braden Presley, Xavier, I do think that changes the conversation quite a bit. Because nobody can debate that, yes, we've lost a few commitments, but then you pick up the number one player in the state of Arkansas. Then you pick up the number one player in the state of Oklahoma. So if we continue down that trajectory, clearly it's addition by subtraction because we're adding more capabilities than we lost. I think this is another indication that might actually be what's happening here as well. Anywho, that's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here in Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't. That's okay. Too more importantly, share, comment, and subscribe my podcast with people out there. You're the bricks, the bread, the butter, fountain fondue, the funny stuff, funky stuff. You know what it is. You're all of it that makes it work. I appreciate what you do. So go do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave some reviews. All right, y'all. Later, my taters.